Hello everybody, my name is Crimson Casts. I'm a speedrunner and speedrun commentator, which means that I'm really excited about day 1 and 2 of the league, and then you should hang out with someone else. I've been asked by my Twitch chat today to make a way too early, super speculative tier list of Leaguestart builds, because there are like a million ideas out there and we haven't gotten much balance update, so there's a bunch of information that's missing and people want to know what to play. I will say that I have informed opinions on maybe half of the builds that are on this list today. I've played very limited number of them, and I'll try to sort of give caveats about what my knowledge level is, as well as take feedback from my chat, and point you to creators who might be more knowledgeable about individual archetypes. My knowledge in general comes from playing speedruns myself on a variety of different classes, as well as doing a ton of research to be able to cast the races. So I've talked with top players for every single different class and looked at their POBs and notes in order to be able to provide more informed commentary. And I've gotten each class to kill Tavakai at least once, but I haven't done that with all the different archetypes. I will also say that there's a lot of caveating to be done here, where like some tooltips for skills we haven't seen updates to yet. There's still plenty that can change with GGG adding more after patch notes. And the other thing to say is that like nearly any build, if you have 10 Divine or 20 Divine or 100 Divine, you can clear all content with it. So if you like something that's in a lower tier, great. The other thing that I want to say is that I'm going to be leaning pretty heavily into how strong the build is before you get good crafted bases in endgame, meaning I'm very interested in how long it takes you to get to tier 15 and how strong it is both offensively and defensively, how cheap and affordable it is, and we're going to be giving less of a weight to its ability to transition into some super high tier thing in the endgame, because I assume that by the time that you have 50 or 100 div, you're going to be comfortable buying twink items and switching to an ascendancy that requires more specialized stuff. So I'm going to be leaning pretty heavily toward the like streamer day 1, 2, 3. So the sort of like first 25 to 40 hours played for a typical player, and then we're going to be discussing what things can and can't transition. So if there's a particular archetype that you're interested in, please use the chapters down below, and we'll try and give you as much information as we possibly can. To start off, there are a couple of things that are clearly super S tier. I'm recording this a couple of hours after we saw the Martial Artist Ascendancy reveal trailer from GGG, which cleared up the last couple of tooltips and nodes for us. And having talked to FG Corbin 21, who is a monk specialist, this is broken. Martial Artist just in general is broken and is S tier. So we're actually going to have that be at the very top of our S tier. Martial Artist, essentially anything. Martial Artist Falling Thunder, Martial Artist Wyvern, Martial Artist Ice Strike, Martial Artist Whirling Assault, Martial Artist. Play Martial Artist. I, in particular, have played very little Monk, especially in the endgame. I've only gotten Monk to Act 4 one time, just for the sake of doing it for completionist. But I trust FG Corbin's opinions, and he is very confident that Martial Artist is extremely strong, and from my own reading of the tooltips and looking at the modifiers, it looks like Martial Artist for essentially any build archetype is going to be extremely strong. I will say there are a couple things about the Martial Artist Ascendancy make it very limited, in that it seems to be very aimed at unarmed attacks in a number of places, and it has a number of things that scale, in particular with build-defining features that are quite specific to Monk. So power charge scaling, for example, or evasion ES has specific bonuses. Bells and Calling Strike, for example, another thing, which means that outside of Wyvern, which really enjoys interacting with that power charge stuff, it's going to be pretty hard for you to take this ascendancy and apply it to something completely different. For example, Martial Artist Bows doesn't help a whole lot with power charges. There are things that you can do with charge conversion, with charge regulation as a spirit skill, and with resonance, but in general, if you're looking to play Martial Artist, you should be looking primarily at monk-like archetypes. But in general, for that archetype, it's going to be really, really strong, which also means that a lot of our other monk builds, Falling Thunder, Wyvern, Whirling Assault, Ice Strike, are all going to be really, really strong. I will say, in terms of its ability to scale up to clear, I think that both Whirling Assault and Ice Strike are going to be very, very strong. I think that because of Hollow Palm scaling, it's really consistent to get through the campaign. There's still not been much help for the first half of the campaign, say Acts 1 or 2, in terms of Monk's survivability. So that means that you're going to have a pretty rough first few hours, but then by the time that Evasion ES bases come online and you're able to invest a few more points in your defense, you have Hollow Palm, you have your first Ascend. So around level 30 or 40, you're going to stop struggling, and things are going to be very smooth sailing from there. Just expect to be a bit more patient in Act 1 and 2, especially if you're not used to playing Monk. It's very squishy, especially compared to other melee archetypes. I will say that the Wyvern stuff I'm a little bit less convinced of, mostly because Wyvern had some nerfs, mostly to the way that Wingblast and Rend scaled together. The Rend stuff was a bug, and now it's doing the intended amount of damage, but it means that Rend scaling is going to be a little bit more difficult. I think that it's still going to be very, very strong. I've defined the tiers as being like good and also scales well as A tier, and B tier is a solid option with 1 to 2 key limitations. And because the power charge scaling for Wyvern, especially in early maps, before you can start increasing your power charge duration, is going to be pretty difficult, and because Wyvern has a little bit less inherent synergy with the sorts of bell options and unarmed strike options compared to other things, I think that Wyvern is probably going to be a little bit worse. I would say that it's, by this tier definition, a solid option, but it has 1 to 2 key limitations. And I could see that moving up depending on if we see other adjustments to Wyvern skills. So again, my informed guess is that it's high B tier, low A tier for Monk Wyvern. Monk Wyvern. There we go. Falling Thunder. Falling Thunder is actually a really strong leveling skill. Siphoning Strike allows you to get power charges. Some of the new changes to Brink support being added to Act 1 means that, again, with Rend and Wing Blast, you're going to be able to generate power charges. And so a lot of the Falling Thunder leveling scaling, where you generate power charges using Wing Blast and then consume them with Falling Thunder. Falling Thunder applies shock, and then you can use Siphoning Strike to get the power charge back. And then you have a 2-button bossing build at that point where you Siphoning Strike, Falling Thunder, Siphoning Strike, Falling Thunder until the boss is dead. That's pretty strong. I will say that Falling Thunder does scale into endgame incredibly well, especially with the new combo bonuses that we saw, and it's going to be very benefited by the new Glove Ascendancy node for Martial Artist. It appears to me that, from talking to Corbin, that he thinks that Falling Thunder is probably going to be better on Martial Artist than on Invoker, even though Invoker does a whole lot, especially for that application of ailments. So I would say Falling Thunder is probably in the good, also scales well thing, but you will need something that is a little bit better at clear. So if you compare, for example, mid maps where you're level 70 to 80 and you have a couple of items that are pretty good and a couple of items that you're still working on, I think that Falling Thunder, where you're sort of hybridizing Falling Thunder with Wyvern to generate power charges with Rend and clear like that, is going to just not scale as well as what's available for Whirling Assault and Ice Strike, while still being quite strong. So I expect Falling Thunder Monk with like the Wyvern hybrid stuff that FG Corbin does, I would put that in A tier, and I would definitely say that that's a strong way to get through campaign, but maybe something that you would want to move on to, out of, in which case you're going to be using your early mapping on Whirling Assault, Ice Strike, and other stuff. I will just give a shout out here. I'm literally going to write it on the screen so you can see it. You should be following FG Corbin 21 if you're playing anything on any of the Monk Ascendancies this patch. FG Corbin 21 has been a Monk specialist since 0.1, has produced highly edited YouTube video guides that give the information super concisely, and also really, really thorough Mobalytics written guides. So FG Corbin 21 is a Monk expert that you should be following up with, and if his tier list disagrees with mine, you should believe him, because he's more specialized about that. Now let's talk about something that I actually know about, which is Mercenary Ascendancies. I personally, my plan right now is to play WitchHunter Nades with a very small twist, which is that WitchHunter Nades, I'm actually going to be using Velaco's Vice, which converts 100% of fire damage to lightning damage, and that gives you a little bit of help with clear and shock application, because lightning damage allows you to use Herald of Thunder and get big shock. So as a consequence, I've played WitchHunter Nades. I think that it's probably in again, high B tier, low A tier for WitchHunter Nades. There are a couple of questions that we have about it, but it seems that the nerfs to Sorcery Ward are mostly offset by the changes to evasion and armor bases. Meaning that in early maps at level 65 to say 72, in early maps, you're going to actually be doing slightly better than you were before. about 2% better overall sorcery reward, 2% better overall evasion, and slightly better deflection rating if you're playing an evasion deflection stacking character. And then in the end game at level 80 plus, when you have the nice crafted items, it's going to be slightly worse, about 12% worse. But again, if you invest in deflection, the deflection scaling can offset that change in sorcery reward. And also at high investment sorcery reward, it was easy to get, say, 8 to 10,000 sorcery reward very, very early on in the league, say day 2 or 3, by the time that you're around level 85 and have some crafted items with, say, a couple of tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 modifiers, you're able to get huge amounts of sorcery reward. And so if you get 9,000 instead of 10,000, or if you get 7,000 instead of 8,500, your still max hit pool is going to be great. The other thing is the changes to evasion deflection are going to be particularly strong for sorcery ward, because evasion deflection still needs some way to scale its max hit. So in the absence of something like life stacking or energy shield, sorcery ward is still probably going to be the best ascendancy point for evasion deflection stackers. And that means that WitchHunter, despite a very small nerf to its absolute top end, is still going to be a very, very strong league starter. I'm a little biased, and it is my planned league starter, so I'm going to put it at the bottom of A tier, but you could certainly make an argument that since Nades struggle to play with faster clear speed without access to either high attack speed or some source of onslaught, that you could say, like, hey, you know, it has the key limitation of its clear speed being a little bit difficult to get up to par. That said, its bossing damage is extremely good, and even with very limited items, you can get to clear, you know, tier 3 Zesht and kill Uber Arbiter and all the rest of it with a very low budget. So it's a pretty comfortable playstyle, and I also think that there's one more benefit to league starting WitchHunter Nades, which is why I'm promoting it to A tier over B tier, and that's that we don't know what Gemling does yet. And so Gemling Legionnaire gives alternate quality to all the different skills, which could mean that if it does something particularly valuable for grenades, like giving increased AoE to help with clear, or allowing grenades to activate multiple times to increase its base damage, now that we've seen martial weapon skill levels nerfed, that could be a pretty substantive increase to the power of grenades, depending on what the alternate quality does. I, in particular, would really like to see AoE grenade activate twice, something that adds some interesting sort of unique flavor to grenades compared to other projectiles that don't scale with activating multiple times or with area of effect. And if Gemling Legionnaire does good stuff for grenades, then Gemling Legionnaire is probably going to scale extremely well. Part of the reason for that is because Gemling Legionnaire, with the quality bonuses, would do a whole lot for a variety of different crossbow archetypes. But also because now that Pathfinder's ascendancy nodes for reduced penalty of using skills while moving have been nerfed, Gemling Legionnaire, if you have a whole bunch of green gems socketed, is going to give you some pretty substantive bonuses to your mobility, and it may actually be slightly faster than playing a Pathfinder, with the exception, of course, of immunity to slows and prevention of sprint knockdown. But your actual ability to move skills while attacking is very, very powerful. The other thing that is making me push Nades up a little bit farther from B tier into A tier is that I'm making positive assumptions about what Trarthan cannons actually do. Of course, Redemption, the unique Trarthan cannon that gives instantaneous grenade detonation and bypasses grenade cooldowns, would mean that your clear speed goes up a whole lot, but it also may mean that crafted Trarthan cannons, according to the reveal video, give you new grenade-focused modifiers. And so I'm making positive assumptions that those will be good at improving the main problems that grenades have, which again are AoE and clear speed. It has no struggles with damage, and it's very strong defensively as an archetype. So I think that Gemling Nades has some key limitations, but also some question marks that I'm going to put inside of these brackets. And so Gemling Nades gets a whole bunch of question marks, and that means that you can be very confident that WitchHunter Nades is going to scale and has the potential upside of giving you access to Gemling once we get more information about what alternate quality does. If alternate quality is really good for Nades, then you can scale WitchHunter and then transition to Gemling. The other thing that's making me push Gemling down is that the new barrier skill, Virtuous Barrier, that gives you gem moats based on your socketed skills, is very defensively weak, which means at low budgets you're going to struggle quite a bit on Gemling. At max investment, it appears to be about 105% increased evasion, armor, and energy shield, and 105% increased is just simply not that strong. And that's at maximum investment. There are potential other uses for that, especially for regen-based builds, for life and mana regen that you can get at high investment, but neither one of those is going to be very relevant to grenades, which have you socket primarily strength and dexterity gems. So Compared to other defensive options, I think that that's not very, very strong at all. But I do think that Gemling Nades has enough potential upside based on what alternate quality does and based on its access to mobility that at high end, once you can overcome those defensive problems with access to crafted gear, you can do a whole lot. So I'm going to go ahead and remove Gemling Nades here. And like I said, it has a bunch of question marks because we still don't know things. I'm making positive assumptions about Trarthan cannons and what they're going to do. We don't know what the drop rate is going to be for redemption itself, and then we can make some assumptions later on about alternate quality once we get there. So neutral assumptions about alternate quality with a lot of upside, but nothing assuring, and positive assumptions about what Trarthan cannons do mean that I'm putting nades a little bit higher, and the safer and stabler starting option is WitchHunter nades, which we know is going to be safe and stable essentially no matter what, and I'm going to produce a build guide for that. Let's talk about lightning things, by which I mean Stormblast Bolts, Galvanic Shards, and Plasma Blast. The upside of Galvanic Shards in particular was that it just cleared faster. You could get it to chain, you could hook it up to heralds, you could get really high attack speed and go around killing things super efficiently with that. But that was enabled by a pair of lineage supports, Arjun's Metal and Rotha's Assault. Arjun's Metal was 100% chance to load a new bolt into supported skills on kill. That was extremely strong, and that one was taken behind the barn out back and shot in the head. It's now 25% chance on kill, which means when you're fighting dense content and you're killing multiple enemies per skill activation, you're going to be doing great on that. But in slightly sparser content, especially as you scale, it's going to struggle a little bit more dealing with crossbow reload. And that means that Arjun's Metal, which used to prevent you from needing to put any reload bonuses on your tree, you're now going to need to invest in faster reload on tree, and that is going to allocate something like 5 to 8 points away from the rest of the build, as well as slowing it down pretty substantively, which means that Galvanic Shards, while not dead in the water, definitely has some better playstyle options if you're interested in a fast chaining ranged build. I would say that like lightning things for Mercenary are pretty bad. That said, Plasma Blast appears to have been totally fine, which means that it's a completely viable bossing skill at high investment, and also Stormblast Bolts is similarly one of the best low-budget boss killers in the entire game. So lightning things has a couple of key limitations. I would say, according to my tier list definitions, I would say it's probably in high C tier. You can make an argument that it has 1 to 2 key limitations, but I will say that Galvanic Shards WitchHunter is probably in C tier, and I wouldn't encourage you to league start it on the basis of the Arjun's Metal nerf. That said, Rotha's Assault mostly survived, and Rotha's Assault is reload on dodge roll, and that is a little bit clunkier, but I would say that if you are interested in a fast ranged playstyle, I would argue that Mercenary Lightning things is probably not the very best league starter because there are just too many limitations to overcome. Once you have a higher budget, if you like the playstyle, you're going to be able to invest in it, which means once you can afford a couple of lineage supports, including things like Arakiatas and some things to accelerate your movement speed and clear speed, it's going to be totally fine. It just means that as far as like what you should start on day one, I would not say Galvanic Shards WitchHunter is going to be as strong as it was in previous patches. It's not dead in the water by any means. Remember, anything is viable at high investment. To continue, Permafrost Bolts has some of the same limitations that Galvanic Shards WitchHunter does, which is that the reload bonuses are a big problem, and that means that its ability to freeze bosses and then completely shatter them is pretty tough, which means, again, if you like the playstyle of freeze enemy, shatter enemy, there are better options available. To spoil a little bit, you should probably be playing ice bow skills, not ice crossbow skills right now, because the lineage support changes just affect Permafrost Bolts too much in sort of mid to high map progression, tier 10 map plus, especially as you start crafting items. That said, it is still safe and it is still viable if you like the playstyle, but there's a better option available with a very similar playstyle if you play bow-based things. So I would say Permafrost Bolts sort of C tier for me right now. Gemling in general, like I said, there's just a ton of upside, but we don't know enough about it for you to be confident in league starting it. So we're again going to put that in B tier with a solid option where it has some things available, but there are some key limitations. And also it tends to take slightly higher investment to make the best use of Gemling, because it requires you to fulfill certain requirements in socketing a certain number of support gems of a particular attribute type, or And that means that things like Greater and Perfect Jeweler's Orbs are going to be especially important in the leveling progression for Gemling. So I wouldn't play Gemling day one if you're trying to min-max it, but it looks like if alternate quality and some of the other ascendancy changes are particularly powerful, that Gemling might have a lot of upside, which means that Tactician Ballistae, for example, or WitchHunter Nades could be a very viable league starter if you're comfortable with the idea that then you may respec to Gemling. And so if you're excited about Gemling, I would probably level on something else, at least at this exact moment. If we get more information from GGG, or if we get a good data mine a couple of days before patch, you can come and ask me how good Gemling is for the sort of core mercenary archetypes, and I'm going to be able to confidently answer you there. Regarding Ballistae, we're going to talk about like supporting fire tactician. We're going to talk about armor break and chaining and things like that. That's very strong. Very, very strong. I would say that a couple of things about the totem changes have made Ballistae able to scale a little bit better. They struggled in 0.4, mostly because of a summoning attack delay. But now it appears that Tactician is going to be extremely strong. And so I'm actually going to put that in A tier. It's nowhere near as strong as, for example, the Monk Ascendancy things, but Tactician Ballistae, very, very strong. And I believe that there are supporting fire Tactician things coming out from two of my friends. And the one I'm going to recommend is Blazeworks. I know that Blazeworks has already played an armor break ballista technician, and that means that you can expect him to produce a good build guide for that. And even if he's not producing a build guide, he's very, very knowledgeable. It's not an archetype that appeals to me because totems are minions and minion players, blah. So as a consequence, I'm not going to be supporting that playstyle in my build guides. It's just not something that I have spent a ton of time playing, but if you're interested in tactician things, you can follow up with Blazeworks TV, and I don't know if he's league starting it yet, but actually Cal Torak was playing a supporting fire tactician build through the campaign the other day, so you may be able to follow up with him based on his feeling about the patch notes and get some thoughts there as well. So long story short, most of the mercenary builds are in A or B tier. A couple of the core archetypes, mercenary lightning things and permafrost bolt things, are in C tier because they're just done better by other archetypes. Let's talk about the next really exciting thing that everyone really wants to play, which is you want to ask questions about Twisters. And Twisters is played primarily on two different archetypes. The more obvious one is going to be Owl Twisters with the Spiritwalker. Spiritwalker Owl Twisters is going to be very, very strong. It's going to be one of the easiest ways to get through the campaign. It's good and scales well. It has one limitation, which is that it is a very visionary build. So if you're comfortable with the idea of like needing to practice your positioning to be able to get the Twisters to bounce off walls and pierce enemies multiple times, or you're comfortable using the Parry Fangs of Frost tech to get through Act 1 more efficiently, then it's going to be great. And eventually it does smooth out. The Owl Ascendancy providing soaring ground is going to be a big, big deal, as well as the deer-based Ascendancy stuff, which means that it's very, very strong. It's not the best way to play Twisters at ultra high budget, because Twisters scale particularly well with projectile speed stacking, which Owl provides a lot of at low investment, especially on day 1 to 3 of the league. So if you're playing 25, 40, 60 hours on the character, it's going to be very, very strong. But once you get to the point of having hundreds of div, it's not going to be as strong as Abyssal Lich Twisters. I think that Owl Twisters is probably among the strongest league starting builds. It's also going to be well supported. A cautionary tale to you, to those of you who are going to play in trade league economy, is that it looks like it's going to be very, very, very popular, which means for scaling equipment, it's going to be particularly expensive early in the league as there's competition for good base items and good crafts. That said, it does mean that at medium investment, where you're okay with a couple of failed modifiers or buying failed crafts from other people that have 5 out of the 6 most desirable mods, you're going to be fine. Sort of the Fub gun aspect, so to speak, even though I don't know if Fub is planning on starting Twisters. So long story short, on Huntress, Spiritwalker Owl Twisters is probably the prime example of something that is very good and scales well, but isn't like ultra OP going to be giga nerfed. I would say Spiritwalker Owl Twisters scaling with the Spirit Ascendancy stuff is strong A tier. If you were to ask me for a generic recommendation of a class to play, because it's going to have a slightly better Act 1 than Monk from a defensive survivability perspective, Spiritwalker Owl Twisters are going to be good. Also, I should say, because it's a pure dex class, the deflection changes at medium to high investment are going to be good. And of course, Twisters has really good access to blind with Whirling Slash, which is especially important for that deflection stacking. I think that this build is like among the most safe and stable League starter options. So Spiritwalker Owl Twisters. And then if you're interested in transitioning to a rarity bot on your ritualist, or if you're interested in playing an accuracy stacking Amazon, or if you're interested in playing Rake Bloodhunt later, Spiritwalker Owl Twisters is really, really good, as well as, of course, the new Ascendancy. If you want to play Pokemon Master, that's going to be played by a variety of people. And if you're asking generically for a Huntress leveling build, it should be Spiritwalker Owl Twisters, unless you have some strong reason to do this. I should say that Huntress and Twister things in general, there is one person and only one person to whom you should be listening, which is Snoobe85. Snoobe85 has been beating the drum about Twisters being good for an incredibly long time. And he actually did, he participated in a Leaguestart showcase race that I hosted, and I'll be uploading that to YouTube as well. So if you want to compare a couple of these different things, Corbin, the monk player, and Huntress Twister on Snoobe were both showcased, along with one more player that we'll be talking about in a second. But generically speaking, I would say Huntress Owl Twisters is good. It scales well. It works really good. It has a couple of limitations in that you will need to practice the skill rotation. And so if you're not comfortable with that sort of higher amount of mechanical investment of needing to play a visionary playstyle, and you're not as practiced on positioning your projectiles, it's going to be pretty difficult. I also don't know much about how Twister works on controller, because I'm a WASD player, and I think that the mouse placement stuff for a lot of these, you know, aim and fire type projectiles is going to be pretty difficult for you to handle on controller. So a note there to the controller players to reach out to Snoobe and other people who have more specific domain expertise to talk about Twister things. Regarding Twisters, just while we're thinking about it, Deadeye Twister, ridiculously strong. Deadeye Twister, projectile, speed stacking. Deadeye Twister, good. Deadeye Twister, probably one of the safest and most stable League starters right now. Especially with the changes to the other sorts of default ranger options. So again, it's good and it scales well. Again, there's some limitations in your ability to like play things there. Since we're talking about Twisters as well, remember this is a League start tier list, and Abyssal Lich Twisters is a horrible idea for your League start build, in that Abyssal Lich, Secret Ascendancy through the Abyssal quest line, take a Lich, you hop in, you kill Kulamak, you ascend to an Abyssal Lich. It gets incredibly strong scaling bonuses that are very, very relevant to Abyssal, to Twisters. Notably, it can stack a huge amount of projectile speed through the Umbral Well Ascendancy. 787 Prada is a creator who's very, very well known for this build, and it's ridiculous. However, because it's a hidden ascendancy that you just literally cannot get access to before late maps, as well as the fact that it requires some more specific gearing options in order to really optimize, the idea of leveling a Lich using Twisters and playing it as your League start build is pretty tough. If you enjoyed the idea of leveling some of the other classical Witch leveling options like Ascension Contagion or Plants, and you want to be able to transition to this, this is a very good transitionary build, but it's not a good League start build. It's too expensive. It requires you to use the Secret Ascendancy. It's very, very gear dependent and so on. The other thing to say about Abyssal Lich, and in fact about the caster ascendancies in general, is that there's been a pretty significant change to on-tree survivability while leveling, mostly in gigantic nerfs to faster start of energy shield recharge, which means that the delay between taking a hit and your ES starting to recharge is generically much longer than it was in previous patches. And that means that unless you have some way to overcome that by playing Disciple of Varashta, which has benefits to ES recharge rate and faster start of ES recharge, or playing Lich, or playing one of the Monk Ascendancies that gives you some way to do that, either with the Martial Artist combo expenditure stuff or with meditation, then ES is going to be much, much harder to level super early on, and you're going to need to invest through your ascendancy probably on fixing your ES problems, which is again like why Abyssal Lich Twisters is D tier. I would actually say that the way I defined D tier, it's too expensive to be a starter or generically very limited. I would consider putting it in the do not play tier. This should not be your first build of the league. It's a great build, not your first build of the league. While we're talking about witch things, though, EDC Bonestorm, very strong, scales well, easy to gear, well supported by excellent content creators. There are going to be a ton of build guides available. This is a very well-established archetype. It's done well in races at low gear investment. It's been completely untouched. There was one change to how Bonestorm works in that it lost the sustained tag, which, as I understand it, means that it changes the crit for the skill from being independent for each projectile to being all or nothing when you hover 20 bone spikes above your head. In the average damage case, this won't matter, and also Bonestorm scales extremely well. Of the caster skills, it's by far the best one for boss killing in the campaign. Essence Drain Contagion is smooth and comfortable on mouse and keyboard. It's smooth and comfortable on controller. It's so good it's race viable. In fact, it's rank 1 race viable. It's comfortable in maps. It scales well. It's cheap. It's not particularly interesting as a playstyle, and a lot of people feel that it falls off later on in maps. Essence Drain Contagion does well in density content, so if you're planning on playing things like Breach or Abyss, it's probably going to be very good. If you're planning on playing slightly sparser content, it's probably not going to be quite as good. But it's a very good thing, and it also gives you access to a lot of powerful witch ascendancies, which means that you can then transition to things like those Abyssal Lich builds, like those minion builds, and so on and so forth. Same argument kind of goes for plants. Plants loses a little bit of benefit to shock conduction, but plants in general, really strong. I will say that there are a couple of limitations in witch plants, mostly in the form of survivability, and some early changes to spell damage on minion death with living lightning changes. These are extremely niche. That doesn't really matter. It's good and scales well. You can play witch plants. While we're talking about it, we'll also just add Plant Oracle in there. Again, cheap build, easy to get online, well supported by people. Regarding content creators for EDC Bonestorm and for Plant Witch, if you have witch questions for EDC or for plants, you absolutely should go hang out with Dead Rabbit. And then as far as Druid plants, I don't know. I haven't watched the guide myself. I haven't read the written guide, but I have played a number of Rax guides across a number of different games. And so you definitely can trust the Druid plants build from Rax and Terex. Obviously, Rax is a very thorough guy in his build guides, and importantly, he has already said that he's going to play the build, which means that you know that he's going to be updating the build guide. He's going to be both demonstrating the playstyle and available for you to ask questions too. So if Druid Plants is an option that you really like, you should hop on that. Blood Mage Cast on Crit Comet is our first build as a league starter. Blood Mage Cast on Crit Comet, not a thing that you should do. The Leech nerfs are pretty substantial and are not overcome by the changes to the Ascendancy spell Leech changes, so that's going to be a big problem. And then also it's just going to be extremely expensive. At ultra high investment, it looks like it's going to be about as strong as ever once you can overcome the Leech limitations through gearing, which shouldn't be too expensive, but will require you to play something else. So if you want to play Blood Mage Cast on Crit Comet because you're Talkative Try's brother and you love Cast On, it's your favorite archetype, you can definitely do that. But that's going to be a high divine late league thing. You're going to be playing something else for a week and then transitioning once you can overcome things. The other thing to say is that the ES changes impact the early survivability of this quite a bit, and Blood Mage in particular doesn't have a whole lot of ways to overcome that. So you're going to be leveling like as a Lich and then reascending Blood Mage later. And life-based casters in general are going to struggle quite a lot. So you should just not play Blood Mage Cast on Crit because the Leech changes are too substantive. Minions, safe and stable. Couple of key limitations there. One is that witch minions, solid options, I'm going to put them in high B tier. Solid option, definitely safe and stable, super easy to play. Playing non-minion witch is probably going to be better as an early league starter, because minions primarily as a playstyle early on, the stuff that I've seen that people really enjoy is the sort of upheaval with contagion stuff, and then you're splitting points between minion nodes and contagion nodes, which means that you have to use your weapon swap for that. And early on, weapon swap points while leveling are limited and splitting your passives can be a little bit difficult. Still, again, a very solid option. Has the key limitation that it requires a bit more specific gearing, especially in access to scepters with plus level of minion skills, helms with plus level of minion skills, and that means that if you don't get good luck with either crafting that on your own or finding it in vendors, it can cost a couple of exalts on trade and mean that you're going to be struggling until you get to having a couple of chaos or a couple of exalts to buy those sorts of items. So because it scales through a few specific modifiers and because it splits your passive tree, it's a little bit of a difficult thing, especially scaling into mid maps than just Essence Drain Contagion with Bonestorm by itself would be, but still very strong. I'm going to put it in high B tier, solid option, 1 to 2 key limitations, mostly in that if you get unlucky, it's a little bit harder to recover than is the case. So good. We're going to put Witch minions here. Again, in very solid option, has 1 or 2 key limitations. Again, anything here is going to be a completely safe and comfortable Leaguestart. So that does it for like the main Witch archetypes as far as I've been able to. Let's talk about a couple of interesting changes to the Ranger ascendancies and then move back to other things. Ranger, Deadeye Nades, going to be fine. Deadeye Nades is kind of difficult to play with the changes to ES recharge rate. So there are a couple of defensive problems for Deadeye right now. If you want to play Evasion ES Hybrid, the nerfs to faster start of ES recharge are going to mean that recovering that energy shield is substantively slower than it used to be. And again, playing pure evasion, you need some way to scale your max hit pool, which since you, in the case where you're playing pure evasion deflection, won't be able to do that. It's going to be pretty rough. At high investment and high budget, it's going to be totally fine. As a league starter, you can't play pure evasion deflection, you don't scale your max hit, and hybrids are going to be a little bit more difficult to do because you don't have an obvious solution to your faster start of ES recharge rate, which means that you're going to be needing to play much more defensively in your middle progression from, say, end of campaign to level 85 before your economy gets online. So I would say it's a solid option, but has that key limitation, especially defensively. It will do about the same or better damage than other ways of playing nades. It, of course, has endless munitions as well as proximity-based damage bonuses. Tailwind is very strong for evasion stacking. It does benefit, of course, from the deflection changes, but I feel pretty strongly that without a change to your ability to scale your max hit, it's going to be pretty rough. So I'm actually going to put it in bottom of B tier as an archetype right now. Safe and stable, tons of bossing damage, but the transition to maps can be a little bit rough, especially defensively. However, staying with Deadeye Ice archetype, Frost thing, freeze them and snipe them type build, whatever you want to call that, that's going to be very strong. That's going to be very, very strong. If you're playing Deadeye, we had a Lightning Arrow League, then we had a Poison League, and now we're probably going to have a Deadeye Ice League, which is cool. It's also part of the reason that I said that Permafrost Bolts was pretty bad, because with the changes to lineage supports, the better option that would be available for Permafrost Bolts is to play it on a Deadeye. And so Deadeye, again, probably very good, scales well. There were some adjustments to early damage for snipe, which means that very, very early on in the campaign, if you don't get good weapon modifiers, if you don't get currency to craft a good quiver, it can be a little bit more limited early on in campaign. That said, Deadeye Ice Snipe was going to scale extremely well, and generically speaking, bow-based builds with things like Spiral Volley have really, really good clear early on and with low investment. And so, yeah. So long story short, Deadeye Ice Snipe, if you're interested in like a pure ranger playstyle, is going to be like low A tier. I would say I don't think it's going to be like as strong as, for example, Spiritwalker Owl Twisters. Actually, I think it's probably higher than this because I think Deadeye Ice Snipe is a better league starter than WitchHunter Nades. So I'll move it up in A tier. We'll put it in mid A tier. I think that it's not going to be as safe and stable as Spiritwalker Owl Twisters. I think that there are probably economic effects that are going to affect the viability of this. So like we don't know, for example, what super major creators like Fubgun are going to be playing, and that could really affect the price of top-end bows. I don't happen to know a top-end creator who's playing this, but that said, it's a pretty easy build to figure out, so I think that you guys are going to be fine. Let's talk about a couple of other things. Poison Pathfinder saw some changes, mostly through unique items there. I think it has a couple of key limitations, especially in the changes to poison pustules and in a couple of different things regarding the uniques that enabled that build. I also just never felt it was that strong as a league starter. It was strong at high investment, but it just doesn't feel that satisfying for me to play in particular. So long story short, I think that it's probably low A tier or high B tier. I'm going to put it in B tier because I think it's a solid option, but also I don't think it's a particularly strong league and I would discourage you from playing it. I think that if you're interested in a pure ranged archetype, probably Twisters and Ice Ranger stuff are going to be doing better. So we'll put it, toward the top of B tier along with Monk Wyvern, but I don't think that Poison Pathfinder is going to do really well at all. Pathfinder concoctions are complete dog shit. Don't play them. They are the worst skills in the game. I'm not even going to elaborate. The fact that GGG has this archetype in the game at all is a blessing, because it may as well not exist. So yeah, you can ascend that and click on it. Don't do it. I don't know anyone who's doing it. It's one of the lowest skill played on PoE Ninja. You won't even be able to use PoE Ninja to steal other people's support gem ideas. You won't be able to find any creator playing this. It doesn't scale well. It doesn't have solutions for the flask-based problems. Unless Mage Blood comes out of nowhere and gives the best flask bonuses for concoctions you've ever heard of, this is a completely terrible idea. Do not Leaguestart Pathfinder concoctions. Just don't do it. Let's talk about both Deadeye and Pathfinder Lightning Arrow together, actually. Deadeye and Pathfinder Lightning Arrow are in a really weird state, and talking to top-level bow speedrunners, people who've won demigods on bows before, it's hard for me to figure out exactly what the fuck is happening with this. I know that there are a number of creators who feel like it's completely dead, and my initial reading of the patch notes is that it's not having a good time. It is not waking up and having a picnic. But ups and downs. So Lightning Arrow can no longer chain multiple times to the same target. The main way that this affects Lightning Arrow is that it no longer can chain multiple times to a singular lightning rod, which means that you have meaningfully worse burst damage against bosses. The reason that this is so important for leveling is that bosses in the transition from 0.3 to 0.4, bosses have initial large damage reduction, and so now you're going to have worse burst damage, and the bosses have a defensive layer against that sort of pre-stack the rods, fire at the rods thing, and its ability to chain multiple times to the same target is lowered. That said, there are changes to Lightning Rod, which are helpful. Lightning Rod had a number of weird bugs and scaling problems with multiple projectile stacking. So if you had something like a dual string bow that grants surpassing chance to fire an additional arrow, or if you socketed multi-shot support, or if you had surpassing chance to fire an additional arrow on your tree, that didn't interact with projectile skills that use projectile count to place a number of projectiles, by which they mean lightning rod, stormblast bolts, gas arrow, things where you fire up and it rains down. Those are fixed because we haven't played them yet, and it's pretty hard to POB simulate exactly how that works. It's hard to know exactly where it is. I'm pretty confident that Lightning Arrow is not going to be the worst build you've ever played. That said, it's definitely beyond having a few key limitations at this point. You can't initially burst down bosses, which means compared to other very strong builds, it's going to be pretty difficult. Lightning Arrow in general struggles with clear during the campaign because you have to play the sort of classic Lightning Arrow walk backwards, fire as you're walking backwards archetype, and that means that since you have lower damage per hit, you're going to be using multiple attacks per mob, which is not true of a number of other projectile skills, notably Twisters, notably Ice Shot, and notably grenades. All do very well at one-shotting mobs. So Lightning Arrow probably has a little bit of a slower clear. I would say it's probably the least exciting and going to be the least started of the main Ranger archetypes, that being poisons, freezes, and shocks. And I think that it's just not a Lightning Arrow league. If you like it, if it's old reliable for you, it's definitely going to be playable. And top-level bow players are actually split among this. I've seen a lot of people who do speedruns specifically saying that it's going to be fine and totally playable. But being fine and totally playable is different from being a very effective league starter at a low budget. And I just think that it's going to be an Ice Ranger league. So I'm going to put Lightning Arrow in bottom of C tier, saying it's viable if you like the playstyle. There are better options available. So that's it for Ranger. Let's talk about Sorceress for a second. Sorceress is in like a really weird spot, just in general. The changes to Bonestorm are extremely minor, and that means if you compare the two major speedrunning archetypes for casters, that being Ember Fusillade and Bonestorm, Ember Fusillade still struggles. We were hoping to see some changes to infusions because Sorceress scales well through infusions, but unfortunately we didn't see any changes there, and so building up infusions, especially in the first 3 acts, is pretty difficult before you're able to get a number of different lesser jeweler's orbs and do things to support skills to generate more infusions. And so as a consequence, sort of your generic Spark plus Ember Fusillade leveling League starter is not in a bad spot. It's just in the same spot that it's always been in, which is, bottom of B tier. It does mean that Ember Fusillade is still the best pure elemental spell that we've seen for bossing, and with the changes to Comet and a few other skills, it's going to be fine. If you want to level with elemental spells because you're sick and tired of plants and EDC, it's going to be very, very good. It has a couple of key limitations, though, mostly in that generating and maintaining infusions is really hard at super low levels. So as a consequence, Ember Fusillade, again, if you like the archetype, is going to be good. I could place it in C tier because it's viable if you like the playstyle and there are better caster options available, but really it feels more to me like it's a solid option. And if you have Sorceress questions in particular, if you have just Sorceress questions at all, you should be hanging out with my friend Wes Desu. He's been focusing on creating a really accessible Leaguestart guide, and he, it plays perfectly comfortably. It clears easily. It does a number of different things. So let's just, while we're at it, go ahead and put Varashta Plants. Varashta Plants, because of the benefits that Varashta provides, in particular to ES recharge rate, is going to be one of the stronger things for pure energy shield wearers early on, as well as a couple of the other points that give you access to things. So we're talking about a pure non-summoner Varashta Plant player. I would say that it's not quite as strong as Plant Oracle. I would say that it's probably not quite as strong early as Plant Lich, but Varashta Plant's very, very strong. I would say it's, at the absolute bottom of A tier. If I were to play plants on Leaguestart, I would definitely be talking to both West Desu and Dead Rabbit because they have spent time with those ascendancies that I haven't spent, and I would be saying, hey, I want to level on plants. I want to keep playing plants. Would you personally be playing a Lich or a Varashta? So spend some time in POB and talk to other people, but it seems to me that there isn't a huge gap in the overall offensive output. The trees are extremely similar. It's just ascendancy differences that you should spend some time understanding if you want to do Varashta Plants. Regarding a couple of other options, Ice Nova is really interesting. Essence Train Contagion has been the race meta for competitive Leaguestart ladder pushing, as well as for the actual GGG races for all the caster archetypes since the beginning of time. However, there was one Italian source player named Lettu, Lettu, who showed up and actually was using Ice Nova as their clear skill instead of Essence Drain Contagion. It appears that they were, from looking at their tree, which I was able to snoop because I hosted one of the races where they did this, and I was able to look at their tree. It was kind of interesting. It appears that Ice Nova with infusion stacking can do a whole lot of things. It struggles with the same things that Ember Fusillade does, where it takes time to get your infusion engine up and going before you get the important keystones for infusions and before you're able to invest in infusions. That said, it appears to be about as fast as Essence Drain Contagion and actually a little bit better defensively because you're inherently freezing all the mobs that try to surround you, which means that you have a better opportunity to get out of trouble there. So I'd actually say Ice Nova as a clear skill paired with some kind of bossing skill is going to be one of the stronger just generic mob clear and early mapping skills. That said, it feels really slow. And I don't mean slow in the sense that it takes you forever to get to maps, but in that you're constantly casting, and so you're constantly suffering the movement speed penalty of casting the spell all the time. So given that it has the limitations of needing to come up with an infusion generation system, which for most builds doesn't come online until the middle of Act 3, which can be 10 hours of gameplay, depending on your skill level and comfort level and the amount of time that you have to play. It can be pretty tough. That said, I'm going to put it next to Ember Fusillade as it's a solid option. It has good and comfortable clear. It doesn't scale super well. That said, Ice Nova appears to have some pretty substantive synergies with Chronomancer. And so as a consequence, I'm going to put it in the like solid option has key limitations tier and toward the bottom of that tier. I would say that if I were playing a sorceress, I would be playing this because I want the variety, not because I think it's the most powerful thing. I think that Plants and Essence Drain Contagion are probably easier to scale as my clear skills. And I think that Emberfuse Slot on Sorceress in particular is as good as Bonestorm, but on Witch and Druid, your bossing skill should not be Emberfuse Slot. It should be Bonestorm. At least if you're talking about like the optimal fastest Leaguestart thing. Let's talk about Spark for a second. Spark is a completely fine Leaguestart skill. Again, infusions, kind of a problem early on. Doesn't scale super well on its own. You have to synergize it with something, whether that's infusion generation tech or really high amounts of cast speed, or use it as an activator for a meta skill like cast on element or cast on crit. So Spark, again, like elemental spells are kind of in a weird spot because like until you get infusions online, they're kind of gonna struggle, and those first 3 acts are a non-negligible part of your total Leaguestart journey. So I would say like Spark, again, elemental spells in general are just going to be in B tier, where like even the very best, most min-maxed elemental spells build, while comfortable and while a classical RPG archetype, not even ARPG, just RPG in general, elemental spells a classic. The way that GGG has chosen to handle their scaling for infusions means that at the high end, they're phenomenal. And as a first thing to do on Leaguestart for day 1 and 2, like as a method of getting through the campaign and through map progression, it can be a little bit more difficult just because the per hit damage is a little bit lower. We will see if there are changes here, though. This is one of the places where I think GGG has a big opportunity to add more content to the patch. We're going to skip over Arc for a second. Varashta Summons, really strong, requires you to have multiple Ascendancy points. You essentially have to be quad Ascended for it to reach its full power, because it's an Ascendancy-enabled build where you want to have those multiple summons. Additionally, there are some like weird things that you want to do, like if you're thinking about the classic Fire and Ice Ginny Summoner build of the week thing, it's super duper strong. That said, it requires you to have enough damage on weapons that you can scale other things on tree. Right, because if you're giving up all of your percent increased damage on tree, you'd better have strong items. And then you can scale the AoE that lets it do full screen clear and lets it pop and burst and so on and so forth. So given the fact that it requires you to be ascended multiple times and you have to overcome a damage limitation problem in order to really get it going by speccing out of on-tree damage and into on-tree AoE and cast speed and minions, it's pretty bad as a default Leaguestart plan. So I would say that it is something that you should hold on to as an idea for later on. That said, it is completely usable in campaign. So it's not bad. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad. I would say that there are better options available for your leveling progression. And then once you have a couple of ascends and you have a better staff and so forth, you can switch over to this build. So for example, if I were interested in playing Varashta Summoner, I probably wouldn't level using Djinns. I would level as Varashta with defensive bonuses and then Essence Drain Contagion until I got to a higher budget and was able to switch over to the summons. But whether you like that idea is up to you. I'm going to put it in C tier as a Leaguestart build. As a general build, it is very strong. But about the first 2 to 3 days of the build, it's not going to scale and ramp up as fast as some other things. So there you go. Let's talk about Druid for a second, and then we'll come back to Arc, because I don't have as informative an opinion on Arc, so I don't want to give you guys bad information there, and I want to think about it a bit more while we yap about other things. Let's talk about Wyvern stuff to begin with. Wyvern stuff, by which I mean the specific combination. By Wyvern stuff, I mean very specifically Wing Blast, Rend, and Oil Barrage. We will talk about Flame Breath separately. Wyvern stuff, good. Wyvern stuff was top of race meta. Wyvern stuff was race win viable. That said, good and bad things. Okay, it's a tale of good and bad things for Wyvern stuff. Good things. Brink 1 support for the combination of Wing Blast Rend, where you stun prime enemies and then Wing Blast them to bring them down. Brink 1 is a support that gives increased stun buildup, but prevents supported skills from heavy stunning enemies. Really strong. it got moved from from tier 2 to tier 1, which means the build comes online slightly earlier with huge quality of life improvement for your setup and payoff leveling builds like Wing Blast Rend and Rolling Slam Bone Shatter, for example. However, we did see some changes to Oil Barrage. Oil Barrage was like ridiculously cartoonishly OP, by which I mean we saw Wyvern players at level 31 with a level 22 talisman with dog water modifiers would walk into Tavakai at level, they would kill a level 53 boss by generating power charges using Lingering Illusion, and then they would one-shot Tavakai, which was a lot. The base damage of Oil Barrage got reduced, as well as the duration that you can channel as a function of the number of power charges that you have. So you used to generate 3 power charges and get 2 seconds per power charge for a 6-second cast time. Now you would generate 3 power charges, you get 1.5 seconds per power charge, and it casts for 4.5 seconds. So effectively a 25% damage nerf there, and then a 10% nerf to the base damage. So a composite nerf of like 35% approximately. And then it also has a mana cost. So long story short, you need to do a lot more investment to use Wyvern than before. That said, it was cartoonishly OP. Like, it was ridiculous. We would watch, like, I was hosting a race, or Ziggy or Rise would host a race, and you'd be watching nothing but the very best, most competitive builds, and Wyvern would stand out as being laughably strong with that Oil Barrage tech. And now they've nerfed it to the point where it's extremely strong, but not, like, laughably so. So I actually think that this is one of the best League starters. If you enjoy the playstyle, it's probably the best way to level a druid for shapeshifts specifically. If you enjoy spells, it's a completely different playstyle. We're not going to compare between shapeshift and spells. You can pick either one. Druid plants, very strong. But Wyvern stuff is extremely good. It also scales well. There are a number of things that you can do to transition from Wyvern into other shapeshift descendancies. The tree is strong and flexible. It gives strong access to exposure and shock. The power charge generation tech is easier than ever. It can actually be played through a number of different things. So I would say like Druid Wyvern stuff, extremely strong, among the best generic League starters in the game, despite the nerfs, because it came from, absolute outer space levels of power and also like ridiculously strong. So I would say like this is in strong A tier, strong A tier. Probably not as safe and stable as Owl Twisters. That said, it is easier to play. Falling Thunder, Wyvern tech stuff, again, harder to play. So it's easier to play. I'm actually going to put it at the very top of A tier here. Again, this is just because I'm assuming that the average person who's watching Leaguestart videos on YouTube will want to consider carefully ease of use in your League starter build. So Wyvern, for example, the power charge generation tech is a little bit clunky, but its damage is overwhelming. Twisters, your ability to generate ground effects for your twisters to consume, a little bit clunky. The twister projectile aiming can be a little bit clunky until you get used to it. Falling Thunder with the shock application. So there are a number of things with like charge generation where all of this is very visionary gameplay. If you're looking at A tier and you're like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in here, what's the easiest to play? EDC Bonestorm, Witch, Plants, and Plant Oracle are very, very easy. They're just, those are the easy ones. So consider those options. Let's talk about bear stuff for a second, because, the bears. Bears are untouched. Bears have strong defensive bonuses. They have easy access to rage generation. They scale well into Walking Calamity in endgame at high investment. It is a slower, slammier playstyle, by which I mean high damage per attack, lower attack speed. So that means that it's going to feel to some players extremely clunky and to other players extremely weighty and impactful. Two different ways of describing the same thing. Bear stuff, very good. If you like a melee playstyle because of the nerfs to warrior stuff, which we will get to in a second, if you just generally like a slow, weighty, slammy thing, you should probably be playing bears. Bears are untouched. Bears really strong. Bears good. Play bear stuff. I'm going to put it a little bit lower than the Wyvern stuff because it's not as cartoonishly OP. And I would say that it doesn't have any real key limitations. You can wear armor. Armor got buffed in early maps. Armor got a small buff in late maps. has inherent endurance charge generation, so if you want to pair it with things that consume endurance charges or with various Warcry enabling tech, it can be good. Bear good, Bear scale well, Bear slam, Bear smash, play Bear. A question that's being asked in Twitch chat because I'm looking over there. Does lower leech make Bear sustain not so good? Doesn't matter. Bear so sustainable. Bear big tanky. If you like a slower, weightier, slammier thing, probably don't play maces. Do play Bear. Play Bear. Let's talk about wolf stuff for a second. I don't know about wolf stuff. From what I've seen of wolf stuff, Craft Slash extremely strong. It looks like minion scaling through Wolfpack has been mostly untouched. Wolf had a little bit of a difficulty in particular compared to both Wyvern and Bear in scaling into the Ultra Endgame. That said, extremely strong. Uruk Smelting Herald of Ice Chaining didn't get changed. Wolf was a great leveling experience for a number of different people last patch. All the different shapeshift stuff is extremely well supported on tree. The tree is quite strong for shapeshifts. So again, Wolf pretty strong. I think that because it has faster attack speed, it actually scales slightly better and is easier to get online because you don't need as much charge generation as you do for Bear to get Walking Calamity going. There are fewer glory mechanics. Its attack speed is better. Wolf stuff probably going to be in low A tier for me because it's good and scales well. I don't think that there are any key limitations. I can't think of any changes to it. I think that you frankly could grab a random O.4 Wolf build guide and play it into late maps. It is one of these things where it's pretty hybrid gameplay, pretty combo-based gameplay, not in the sense that it uses the mechanic combo, but in the sense that, like, you have to pounce to put Freezing Mark on the enemy, and then you cross-slash to activate the mark, and then you Lunar Assault, and then you shred. And that means that there's some ramping to be done, which some people think is good, and some people think is bad, but I do want to call it out. Doesn't have any key limitations, does scale well, has good defensive options, especially in its ability to wear armor in melee combat, has faster base attack time than Bear, which means that it's going to feel like it scales to faster clear speed of the pure melee builds. It's probably going to be second to the various monk things because Quarterstaff has a faster base attack time than Talismans do. But Wolf stuff in general, pretty good. Strong leveling experience. Freeze means it's inherently defensive because you freeze and chill enemies and that slows action speed on bosses. Scales well into maps. Pretty easy stuff. The downside is that it has, some of the heavier combo stuff. So I'll put Wolf, next to Bear. Play Wolf, play Bear. Wyvern definitely still the best of the three shapeshifts, though, by a lot. So, strong things out there. Cast on Crit Oracle, extremely strong. Can't believe they didn't nerf it. Inevitable Crit, OP, ridiculous. As a League starter, you get Inevitable Crit early, so your meta gems are going to be ridiculously strong. Paths Unseen gives a huge amount of Ascendancy-based bonuses to your tree scaling for spell damage, which means you can get it online earlier. It's not as affected by the leech changes as Blood Mages because its inherent survivability is not as good. That said, a lot of the damage did come from life-based casting, which means that at ultra high-end investment, you're still going to want to overcome those leech problems, but it's substantively less affected by the leech than Blood Mage was, which means that it's probably one of the few builds that you can actually say is a true top-of-meta endgame build that you can also level on. That said, Cast on Crit is a very expensive meta gem and doesn't come on until late in the game there, and so some sort of spellcaster oracle that you transition to this later on is going to be something better. So we're actually going to put this in a low tier, even though it scales extremely well, because I want you to level on Plant Oracle instead, and then transition to Spark CoC Oracle later on. So long story short, you should play this. It's one of the strongest builds. It's not too expensive to be limited there, and it is totally viable if you like the playstyle, but there are better leveling options available in particular for this, and so as a consequence, Cast on Crit Oracle, as a League starter, you should start something else and transition to this in maps, is like the generically strongest advice. That said, if you wanted to play it out the gate and play Spark Oracle, have at it. You're going to have a comfortable leveling experience. It's just going to be a little bit slower and more methodical than some other things. Let's talk about Warrior for a second. Warrior Bear stuff is going to go with Druid Bear stuff. It's good. It's good. You should play it. Ascendancy choices affect Bear a lot because there are Glory interaction mechanics, there are Titan interaction mechanics, there are Warcry interaction mechanics, there are Smith of Katava fire damage scaling mechanics. There are all kinds of Warrior Ascendancy things that interact with Bear in useful ways. Where you start on the tree affects your ability to do damage. There are two-handed weapon damage nodes that are useful for Bear. There are defensive bonuses that are useful for Bear. There are endurance charge useful things for Bear. All kinds of things for Bear. Bear. Play Bear. Strong A tier, strong leveling build. It's actually probably, if you like weighty slammy thing, it's probably the best way to play weighty slammy thing. So if you're like a big two-handed melee, hit him with a big stick, watch the big chunk of XP get taken out. If you like that slower, slammier style, Bear thing. Play Bear thing. Bear thing good. Shield Wall, Lamau. Shield Wall Lamau. Shield Wall Lamau. For anyone who's unfamiliar, to stop like shrugging my shoulders and saying Shield Wall Lamau. Fortifying Cry got... Okay, actually, let me talk about Shield Wall itself, and then we'll talk about the build as a whole. Shield Wall's damage scaling as a function of weapon armor went down. However, shield armor went up, especially in early mapping. These two things offset. So the actual base damage of the skill itself, same as always. You're still playing Shield Wall. However, the thing that made Shield Wall like the default warrior melee leveling style was an interaction with Fortifying Cry, where Fortifying Cry would add armor to your offhand, and then you would trigger an effect called Shield Wave every time that you broke one of your shield wall segments. This got changed to now you only can... It no longer shotguns, essentially, and this means that in single target, like shield wall, like, not a thing. It, depending whose POB simulation you believe, and, you know, what their guiding assumptions were in, like, distance from enemy and the size of the whatever, people have made different estimates where it's between a 35 and 50% nerf to the overall damage of Shield Wall as a build at level 31 plus, which means in late campaign and early maps, it is dramatically worse than it was before. It's still among the better leveling things. It's just now that it competes with maces. So like Shield Wall, Lamau. That said, Shield Wall has some blemishes that were covered up by its extremely high base damage. Shield Wall, big vision gameplay, needs totems, needs war cries, needs ascendancy help. That is a problem for a good Leaguestart build. Additionally, it's an extremely slow melee skill, and so as a consequence, if it no longer does overwhelming damage per hit, and you now in some circumstances need to cast 2 shield walls when you used to need to cast 1, you're going to feel the weight of that slow animation a lot more. And so although its DPS nerf is not enormous, I mean, it's a very big DPS nerf, but it's not non-viable from a DPS perspective. It does mean that a large number of the players who were initially interested in Shield Wall the last 2 patches are now going to look at it and be like, yeah, it does good damage, it does fine damage, but it's slow and clunky and tough. That said, it's still going to be one of the easier things to get online, particular in hardcore solo self-found, because you get to carry a big shield and you want to invest currency in your shield, and therefore it's one of the more survivable things. But its damage has come back down to earth, so you better really like Shield Wall if you want to play Shield Wall. I will say viable if you like the playstyle, better options available. Feels like the right home for this. If you want heavy, weighty, slammy thing with big chunky damage and slower attack speed, if that's what appeals to you, that big impact type of feel, Shield Wall is still in the damage range of the other options, but we were putting makeup on a pig before, and now, you know, the pig's snout is showing through that lipstick. So we're going to put this in C tier and say, if you like a slower thing, consider other options. While we're talking about slower things, let's talk about slams. by which I mean Mace Slams. I'm talking about Rolling Slam Bone Shatter and then eventually Leap Slam Bone Shatter with some other type of melee thing to kill bosses with, like Perfect Strike. Couple of interesting things. The build as a whole got buffed, and the way that they did that is by nerfing Rolling Slam's damage, kind of. So Rolling Slam's damage got adjusted. It got reduced by about 15% across the board, if I recall. But it's also its base total attack time got reduced by half a second. So it's faster, lower damage per hit. Its overall DPS is about the same. The reason that this is important is because really early on, good two-handed maces, like if you just really sent it and you transmute, aug, regal, exalt, and won all of your things, you would kill enemies with Rolling Slam, which confusingly is bad. And that's because Rolling Slam doesn't have very good area of effect compared to Bone Shatter. So making it faster and do less damage is helpful. Additionally, Brink 1 got moved from a tier 2 to a tier 1 support, which means you're going to have more support for stun buildup. Excuse me. You're going to have more support for stun buildup and prevention of heavy stunning on your setup skill, on your Rolling Slam earlier on, which means that Act 1 for Warrior Mace Slammy stuff is better than it was before. This is in line with a number of tuning changes that also happened to Mace bases in the beginning of 0.4. So now Rolling Slam Bone Shatters Act 1, from my reading of the tooltips, I expect it to be the best Warrior Act 1 that we've had in a long time. And compared to the field, it's probably actually going to be one of the fastest Act 1s. That said, armor extremely strong in campaign, armor buffed in early maps, slams very good. Slams scale well, especially as you're able to get more attack speed in later campaign and as you transition to Leap Slam and you're able to get AoE bonuses for your aftershocks. There are one or two key limitations to think about, mostly in that Perfect Strike remains one of the slowest bossing skills in terms of its base attack animation. So when you think about that, there are some limitations to... There's some limitations. If you like that playstyle, it's very good. I would say that it's good. It scales well. Armor scales well. Easy to figure out what to invest in. Easy to solve the problems. Easy to gear. Your basic weapon craft is going to be like pretty easy. Your classic find a two-handed mace you like with some, 160% increased physical damage. Get your Greater Essence of Abrasion, get your Perfect Essence of Battle, Perfect Essence of Haste. Desecrate something cool on there, send it. That's very easy weapon craft. It's going to be cheap. It's going to be easy. It's going to be straightforward to figure out. I would say that like pure Mace Slams, pretty good. Mace Slams, pretty good. If I have to decide how I defined these tier lists, good and scales well, solid options has 1 to 2 key limitations. I could put Mace Slams high B tier. I could put it low A tier. It is good and scales well. That said, bossing in particular can be difficult on Leaguestart. Perfect Strike, once you can scale a bunch of attack speed, is going to be particularly strong. Earlier on, if you're not comfortable with the animation, it has 1 to 2 key limitations. I would say, since I'm considering ease of use, especially in early bossing, Acts 1, 2, 3, Mace Slams can be a bit more difficult, but it gets a lot of help with its clear. So I'll say Mace Slams. I'm going to put it low A tier because Perfect Strike in the hands of a practiced user is so strong. But I'm going to encourage you to, if you're thinking about starting Mace Slams, go watch a commentated playthrough. I have a commentated playthrough on Angormus's YouTube channel where he and I worked on a script. I did most of the talking. He did the playing, but it's his notes. And you can go look at that and get a feel for the guide. So long story short, Mace Slams, low A tier, high B tier. You should go look at whether or not you like the idea of Perfect Strike bossing. And you should make sure you have a good tree for that. You should definitely also ask Angormus about that. So if you want to be playing Warrior, you definitely want to be talking to Angormus. You want to be watching Angormus VODs to get a sense of how the skills play before you decide to play it. Non-slams. Non-slams are interesting because non-slams is my catch-all for all the other mace stuff. Earthquakes, Sunder, Hammer of the Gods, all this other stuff. It's hard to figure out how good it actually is from the tooltips. So, how do I say this? There was a bug with like dual wielding affecting Earthquake, and Earthquake seems fine. However, this is kind of a funny thing to say, but like your ability to get through the campaign is based on your ability to keep moving. If you want to go 60 miles and you go 20 miles an hour, it takes you longer than if you go 30 miles an hour. Because Earthquake at super low investment before you can scale the AoE and things like that, you have to place it and then fight enemies on top of it with jagged ground and stuff. It's just harder. Hammer of the Gods requires glory generation, which means it's good once you get it online, but it takes its dial-up internet speeds of getting it online. I would be inclined to say that like non-slams, Earthquake, jagged ground, armor breaker stuff is like a pretty bad plan. I'm ready to be convinced about Earthquake, though. I've been following this Earthquake stuff. I'm ready to be convinced. Angormus did a playthrough on Earthquake after that whole Reddit post about the bug. He wasn't convinced. I watched that playthrough. I wasn't convinced. But I am open in my heart, fundamentally, to someone sending me an 8-minute YouTube video that changes my mind. So, you know, all the things. So I'm going to put non-slams in the, like, viable if you like the playstyle, but because it's pretty stationary, it's slower. A lot of the higher end stuff for Earthquake is really, really good in maps if you scale the AoE, which means once you have good crafted items and can take some damage out of your tree and put some AoE scaling into your tree, it gets better. Titan Earthquake stuff is going to be good in endgame, but it takes longer to scale, and so you should level on something else and then transition to this if you like it, would be my advice. And again, I'm open in my heart to the idea that this is actually good. I just haven't seen like a good 1 to T15 maps on Earthquake non-slam stuff. So, Warrior Bear stuff we already answered. Let's see. Huntress bleed things. Don't do it. Don't level on break, blood hunt, expose weakness, Amazon with Herald of Blood. You like that playstyle and you like the ultra sick, cool, fancy Herald of Blood things, do it. But don't do it. It requires you to have good base physical damage on a spear, which is like antithetical to what spears are in campaign, because spears are fast, weak attacks instead of slow, strong attacks like maces. And that means that bleed kind of hard to get online. Requires tree investment in bleed chance to aggravate bleeding, and so forth, which means that you don't have simple damage increases on your tree while leveling. So, it's either D or F tier for as like a league starter. As a thing to transition to, like once you have 100 divines, you can come in my Twitch chat and say, "Hey Crimson, fuck off, I have a cool bleed build," and then I'm going to look at your level 97 Amazon with perfect accuracy stacking everything and, you know, screen clearing Herald of Blood chaining and whatever, and I'm going to be like, wow, you showed me with your 400 divine build. But as a league starter, don't play bleed things. I'm very torn about saying it's generally limited because, like, Rake has a soft spot in my heart from the 0.2 race meta, but Stomping Ground is completely gone, and it's hard to scale, and, like, bleed things don't do it. So I'm just going to put Huntress bleed things in bottom of D tier. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm going to delete Ritualist here, and we'll just talk about Lightning Spear in general. Lightning Spear in general, as like a league starter, it's fine. It struggles with bossing, and it requires some investment in Frenzy Charge duration, which is a little bit harder to do unless you're willing to be a Vision game player. That said, if you're willing to generate frenzy charges, there are cooler things to do with frenzy charges, like Twisters. So what I would say is if you like Lightning Spear, totally playable. Better options available for leveling. Requires some investment in charge generation. For maps, it's going to remain one of the strongest things to do. I have a whole axiom about this, which is that the best mapping skill is the fastest base attack time that can still one-shot everything. And given that in ultra-late maps, anything can one-shot the whole screen, Lightning Spear becomes extremely strong once you have, you know, a couple chaos to rub together and you have a couple of items and support gems and things that can help you deal with charge generation. At which point it has extremely high screen clear, it chains really effectively, it synergizes with Herald of Thunderwell, it has big access to shock, it extremely fast base attack time. So like as a league starter, probably not. As something to transition to in maps when you're trying to scale through density content and get, you know, currency farming online, Lightning Spear can be particularly strong. It's viable as a leveling build. Like it's fine. In particular, I would say it comes online about the time you get to Act 3, once you get a couple of Tier 3 supports into it, and once you have an Ascendancy and a couple of Spirit Gems to be able to get things going, especially for your charge generation, slightly higher amount of Spirit. So I'm going to put it in like C tier as a league starter. It's a cool thing to play. You probably shouldn't league start it because like the other Spear options, especially if you're willing to overcome those same problems of needing to do Frenzy Charge generation and needing a couple of Spirit Gems and so forth, Twister is just going to be like so much better with the new, like just so much better with the new Ascendancy. So I'm going to actually put it next to its sister and say, viable if you like the playstyle. Like if you love Lightning Spear, log into Lightning Spear, man. Hell yeah. You want me to look at your POB and give you advice on whether you should go Amazon or Ritualist? Fucking send me that POB, brother. I'll take a look. But as far as like, am I going to tell you to league start it? No. It's not as bad as Huntress Bleed things. Like you could play Lightning Spear. You could have yourself a league start on Lightning Spear. That'd be fine. You could have yourself a league start. You could smoke a brisket, you could drink a root beer, and you could have a good weekend playing Lightning Spear, and you're gonna be totally fine. Believe it or not, if you try to play Huntress breed things, they are going to remove the smoker from your house, and you're going to be banned from drinking root beer because they don't want you to taint root beer worldwide with the level of suffering that you would experience playing Huntress bleed things. Chat has been begging me to make comments on particular totem builds, and I'm going to do something that I feel strongly that I need to do, which is to say, like, I don't fucking know. Like, I not an archetype I've played, not an archetype that's been viable in the settings where I've been able to interact with people who play with it, because it hasn't been in the races, it hasn't been top of meta in any of the previous patches. I haven't looked at POBs for it. Word on the street is that a lot of the PoE1 Andes are very excited because the PoE1 Andes are like, hell yeah, totems. I'm told totem really good. I don't know. Ask Palstron. Palstron probably knows. Palstron is smarter than me. Ask Ziggy. Ziggy's been around a while. If you want to know about something that is viable in PoE1 and whether or not it's going to be good in PoE2, you could ask Alcohol. Like, just essentially go find your favorite 40-year-old who's been streaming PoE2 for 10 years, for PoE1 for 10 years. Go find your favorite 40-year-old and don't bring up their receding hairline and do bring up totems. And then you'll get a good opinion. But I'm too young and too virile to know about the history of totems. And so as a consequence, you should ask, go ask your uncle. So Zoomaster Huntress, okay, we're gonna now like essentially like totems are gonna be put in the ask someone else tier. Okay. Ask someone else. Totems. Same thing for Druid Storm Skills. I don't know. Arc is going to be in the same position as the other elemental spells, meaning it's like you can play it. It's a little bit harder to get online than Ember Fusillade and Ice Nova and Spark. And so Arc, I'm going to put a little bit lower because it comes online later and it requires you to do a whole lot more. So I'm going to put it in like, it's better than Mercenary Lightning things and better than Permafrost Bolts and probably about the same as Lightning Arrow and Lightning Sphere, where it has like fundamental limitations right now but it does get online. Like, it will get online. Like, Lightning Arrow, Lightning Spear, and Arc will get online. It's just going to take longer. And so if you want to level a similar archetype, I would level on a different elemental spell and transition later, where you'd have an extremely similar tree, and some of the support gems are going to port over. So if you were asking me, Crimson, I really want to play Arc, what should I level on? I would level on an Ember Fusillade build, and then transition to Arc when I'm all excited about it. So I'm going to put Arc here, and I'm going to put it in the like problematic lightning skills tier, which is the top of C tier. Like, you probably shouldn't start this, is my guess. I'm trying to not look at chat because I want to be unbiased and give you the best thing that I can without just copying the homework of my Twitch chatters. Let's talk about Zoomaster Thing, because Zoomaster Thing, really strong. Zoomaster Thing, good. Zoomaster Thing, okay, so I've like looked at the PoE2 DB numbers, and I have like tried to distill the truth out of the Gazi and Darth microtransaction propaganda. And I can't tell how good it is. Cause like, we don't have the companion nodes for the tree yet. We know that there are 19 of them, but they could be like, companions get healed by your flask. It could be companions get faster attack speed. It could be companions inherit your invasion rating. It could be companions delete the entire screen. It could be companions like are in the files. Like, they just haven't released the companion files. It's all redacted right now, and so like we don't know what the fucking nodes do, and like deciphering the PoE2 DB numbers is hard, and knowing like what is actually possible on the tree is just too difficult. And so like Zoomaster has like the same problem as Gemling, where it looks kind of cool, and there's probably a broken thing out there, and we're just not gonna know. That said, like, there are enough smart people playing it that even if it's bad, the build is going to get refined a lot. Where if you look at people with large audiences, I don't think having a large audience proves that you're smart, but what it does mean is that you are going to have a large chat also playing the thing that you're excited about. And so given that we know that Darth Microtransaction and Corparian are both starting Pokemon Master, that probably means that there are going to be enough people excited about that, and Crip and DM themselves are both Theorycraft knowledgeable people as well. And that means that, like, even if the build is bait, it will eventually get optimized into being good. Because anything is good enough with enough refinement, enough collaboration, and enough budget. So, like, I probably wouldn't say you want to League start it. However, Spiritwalker Owl Twisters is, like, really good. And what that means is you have the backup plan of having, like, a cool fun ascendancy that does cool things. Like, the worst that happens to you if you want to play Zoomaster is that your backup plan is the best build in A tier. Oh no! The best build in A tier is my backup plan. So Zoomaster, I'm gonna put in like the Gemling Nades tier of like, because we don't have the tree and the support gems yet, I don't fucking know. There are a bunch of people who are convinced it's going to be really good. When I look at the numbers, it looks like it's hard to decipher and it might be bait. But Zoomaster, probably high B tier. I'm going to reorganize within these tiers a little bit, just to make the like screenshot better for you guys. So Martial Artist, anything that you like, probably pretty good. So Martial Artist, Whirling Assault, Martial Artist, like Killing Palm, Martial Artist, Triple Heralds, Martial Artist this, Martial Artist that, Martial Artist Hollow Palm, Martial Artist Bell stacking thing with Whirling Assault with Triple Bell with the whatever the fuck, so you daze enemies and blind on it and all the thing. That's broken. Like, it's so broken. It's so broken. Like, I was looking at the numbers with Corbin this morning after the with FG Corbin 21, the monk creator, with guy I am telling you to go follow right now. You should be, it's a Corbin league. You should be like you know, doing that. However, like, I was like, there's just no way this makes it to live. It was like, you can get gloves that with the correct modifiers, the gloves have 1200 evasion rating and 480 energy shield and double gain and like a whole bunch of stuff. So like, holy shit. If you're on the fence between martial artist and other things, play martial artist. It's crazy. If you want to play that new and you really are not excited about the martial artist stuff, I get it. Spiritwalker Owl Twisters is your safest starter, and then you can transition to Pokemon Master later on. Falling Thunder Wyvern Monk stuff is probably one of the safest monk leveling builds, and therefore you can play it, but it doesn't scale as well because it has some limitations. And so that means that like leveling on Corbin's Falling Thunder Monk stuff and then transitioning to Whirling Assault, Bell Stacker, Ice Strike, stuff is going to be probably your safest league start. Like if you had to ask me for one league start, it's playing Corbin's thing. However, that's very vision gameplay. And so Spiritwalker Owl Twisters is the safest, easiest thing. Playing straight up Wyvern, also going to be very strong. Deadeye Ice Snipe, going to be very strong. WitchHunter Nades is going to be really, really strong and is not as affected by the changes to Sorcery Ward as people think. Tactician Ballista is really strong. Deadeye Twister, really strong, but isn't as new. I'm going to move Deadeye Twister down a little bit because it doesn't have a way to scale its max hit, which the other Twister variants do, either because they have access to like ES or Sorcery Ward or something. EDC Bonestorm Witch, Plant Oracle, all very strong, all very safe, all very boring, all very well supported by smart people like Rax and Dead Rabbit. Varashta Plants, same thing. Bear Stuff, Warrior and Druid, comfy if you like a big slammy thing. That's my choice for big slammy thing. If you like weighty, impactful combat, I'm probably not playing Shield Wall, I'm probably not playing Maces. If the thing you want is big slammy thing, it's probably a Bear Stuff league for you. Wolf Stuff, fine. The best of the three shapeshifts is Wyvern though, and remains Wyvern. In B tier, we've got Poison Pathfinder, because the changes make it bad, and it's always been a thing where it's high investment before it gets good. Monk Wyvern stuff, like playing Wyvern on Monk, not leveling the hybrid power charge generation on Wyvern to use on Monk skills, but instead playing like Wyvern with a Monk ascendancy has a couple of limitations, mostly defensively. Early on. Witch minions, again, requires a couple of key affixes, which means you have to get like a minion helmet and a minion level scepter, and that means it's just a little bit harder to gear while leveling, whereas if you have 5 chaos to spend on leveling gear for your second character, Witch minion's extremely safe. Zoomaster, I'm putting in B tier because it has the limitation of like us not knowing what the fuck is going on, because we just don't have the nodes in the tree yet, and so high upside, high risk as it stands right now as I'm recording. Gemling Nades and Gemling General, same thing. There's probably broken stuff out there in the alternate quality universe. We don't have the alternate quality list yet, so I can't in good conscience advise you to do that. That said, Zoomaster and Gemling stuff have really safe leveling alternates, and so until we get data mines or more information from GGG, or until the patch comes out, you can be leveling on like extremely safe builds like Spiritwalker Owl Twisters or WitchHunter Nades or Tactician Ballistae, and then transition to like the new stuff if it ends up being good. Same thing for Deadeye Nades. Deadeye Nades has difficulty scaling its max hit. Ember Fusillade didn't get any helps on the infusion front, didn't get any nerfs. Solid option, requires a little bit of effort and investment in infusions to really make it good, and the ES nerfs do affect it. So the elemental spells are bottom of B tier because the ES nerfs make it a bit harder to survive, especially early on, which means more defensive investment in your ascendancy is going to be required, and they didn't get any help on the infusion front, so as a consequence, they're a little bit more difficult for me to imagine recommending. C tier, viable if you like the playstyle, better options are available for similar things. I'll list the alternates. Arc, as elemental spells go, you can be doing other things. Lightning Arrow, as ranger archetypes go, you can be playing Ice Shot Deadeye. Lightning Spear, probably if you're willing to overcome the frenzy charge generation problems and survivability problems that Lightning Spear has, you're going to be better off playing Owl Twister stuff. Mercenary Lightning Things is Lightning Arrow, but even worse, and also Krangled. And so you should just be leveling a different mercenary thing if you like. It got completely obliterated by... As a matter of fact, Mercenary Lightning Things is clearly in a worse tier than Lightning Spear and Lightning Arrow, so we're moving this down. Because, like, Arjun's Metal got taken out back and shot, and that means that until you have other solutions to your mobility and to your screen clear, and you can overcome the problems created by that, like Galvanic Shard, Stormblast, Bolt, Plasma Blast is just not an archetype that I can imagine recommending to people. Permafrost Bolts is going to be fine. It's not as limited by the changes to Arjun's Metal. That said, it does require you to now put more investment into crossbow reload speed and other things on your tree, which makes it kind of hard and kludgy to scale damage early on, because you're going to need to spend 5 or 10 points on your tree to get that online in early maps and have it feel less clunky. And it's the same core archetype as playing Ice Shot Snipe Deadeye, which does the same thing, but without the need for crossbow reload speed investment, and with an ascendancy that's more offensively oriented and has better access to evasion deflection and is in a better part of the tree for you to transition to EVES hybrids, which, like, so it's better at low investment and it's better at high investment. If you like the Freesome Snipe and playstyle, you should be playing bows, not crossbows right now. Varashta summons suffer the same sorts of problems as Witch minions, where it requires minion levels on gear, but then also it requires additional ascendancy points, so tough. Cast on Crit Oracle is a thing that you can do earlier on. It's viable if you like the playstyle. That said, meta gem scaling, especially early on, before you get increases to cast speed and scaling and so forth, is going to be pretty difficult. It's ascendancy supported, so it doesn't come online until you're in later acts anyways, and then even then, meta gem scaling is pretty difficult before you can stack cast speed, projectiles count, pierce chance, etc. for whatever skill you're using to trigger your cast on crit. So you should be leveling your oracle on something else, like just a generic plant oracle without the investment into cast on crit is probably a better leveling plan, and you can transition to cast on crit oracle once you have a 20 div budget to overcome the cast speed problems. Shield Wall got sent to the Shadow Realm. It's now in DPS in line with other mace skills, but it's now the slowest, weightiest, clunkiest thing, and there's no longer lipstick on the pig to overcome how slow, clunky it is. And so as a consequence, unless you're specifically playing HCSSF and like the playstyle, it's really hard to recommend compared to like just telling you, hey, you like a weighty, slammy thing? Play Bear. Bear good. Bear untouched. Bear not bad. Bear playable on multiple ascendancies. Bear do fire damage. Bear, importantly, is a bear and looks like a bear. And I don't know about you, I have more fun looking at Bear. Bear good. Non-slams like Earthquake thing, I am open in my heart to being convinced, but it requires AoE scaling and a number of entree stuff. And so you can convince me. You can show up in Twitch chat and send me your 8-minute YouTube video of you playing Earthquake leveling and try to convince me. You'd better be convinced that it's at least as good as leveling on Gemling Grenades, though, in order for me to move it up a tier. And do you currently believe that your Earthquake build is as good as like a mediocre grenade playthrough? Hard for me to believe. You can send me your YouTube video, I just don't believe it yet. Things in D tier, Abyssal Lich Twisters, super high investment, Secret Ascendancy. At high investment, you're going to get there. Don't level on it. Don't league start it. Can you start like Lich, EDC, and transition later? Yeah, of course. For sure. Can you twink this? Like, can you play it 3 days into League when you have 5 Chaos and you sell 5 Chaos to get a Widow Hail and a couple of good quivers and scale it up that way and then blah, blah, blah? Yeah, totally. But it's a Secret Ascendancy and it doesn't come online until maps by necessity because it's a Secret Ascendancy through the Abyssal League mechanic. So as a consequence, you shouldn't play it. That said, it's like ridiculously strong. It's going to be one of the strongest mapping builds in the entire game. It will require you to put a little bit more of investment into defenses than before because you're going to need to overcome the ES recharge changes. That said, Abyssal Lich is going to be fine. Like, Abyssal Lich at high investment is going to be one of the best builds in the entire league. It's just not a good league starter because I'm talking about, like, campaign, get to T15s, get to level 85, get your first 5 div. Then we transition to anything else. And at that point, Abyssal Lich is good, but it's not online before that point. Huntress Bleed things, don't do it. Mercenary Lightning things, don't do it. Dead, bad, Arjun's Metal got shot, doesn't scale well, doesn't have the damage of nades, doesn't have the comfort and safety of ballisted totems, don't do it. Bloodmaid's Cast on Crit Comet, don't play it as a league starter. Abyssal Lich Twisters, I can at least imagine you having a comfortable Twister leveling experience. It'd be slow and clunky and whatever. But like Bloodmage Cast on Crit Comet, because Leech very specifically can only be overcome by Leech scaling, and that means that you have to get items with multiple specific affixes in order to do it. that's rough. Whereas, like, at least in principle, if you had a couple of Exalts drop in campaign and were willing to trade for a very good spear, you could overcome the lack of early damage on your Lich tree and play Twisters as leveling, which is why Blood Mage cast on Crit Comet is bad. Pathfinder Concoctions is the single worst Ascendancy investment that you can make in the entire game. Don't play it. GGG, please fix. GGG, don't do it. So there you go. There's your tier list. If you're asking me for generic advice, you probably want to play Spiritwalker Owl Twisters or Martial Artist anything, where you should go get Corbin's leveling guide for Falling Thunder Wyvern Monk thing, and then transition to like Whirling Assault Bell thing on Martial Artist. So long story short, follow FG Corbin 21, follow Snoobit 85. If you like the other options, here are the people that you can go talk to. If you have questions specifically about grenades, which I think are middle of A tier, worse than the best, better than the worst nades here. And if you believe in the upside of Gemling, because we just don't know what it does, come hang out with me. There's your tier list. All right, Twitch chat, now you can say bye, YouTube. Now you can say bye, YouTube. Bye, YouTube. Bye. All right, that's a YouTube video.